2022, a black man was strip searched in broad daylight in Jacksonville. Well, the results of that is that the sheriff's office has said that those officers were wrong and violated a policy. Ronnie Reed was stripped in the middle of a street in front of his family members. The officers did not find anything, but he was arrested for selling cocaine. The state's attorney's office dropped the charges against Reed in February, but only after spending more than a year pressing him to accept a plea agreement that would have sent him to prison for at least 4 years. Nicole Manna of The Tributary, the investigative reporter who broke the case, joins me now from Jacksonville. Glad to have you on the show, Nicole.
Hi.
So now the sheriff's department goes, yeah, they really didn't follow the rules in how he was pulled over and strip searched.
Right. So the sheriff's office actually opened their investigation into this arrest after our reporting on what had happened, our reporting that questioned if they broke policy, if they broke state law. That investigation was opened in March of last year, and it was closed in September. We only learned about it by filing another records request asking for that investigation. They had never notified us that it was closed, despite the fact that our reporting is why it was opened.
So now I'm confused. Okay, so the arrest takes place in February. They opened the investigation after the fact. What was he initially stopped for?
So the arrest actually took place in September of 2022. We didn't publish our first story until March of 23. So that is when the investigation was open. What happened in that arrest is the police were doing a kind of drug operation. An undercover officer gave $20 to a different man, and that man was seen walking toward Ronnie Reed. That man went back to the officer, gave him whatever amount of cocaine, and then those officers approached Ronnie and searched him down, patted him down, didn't find any drugs, didn't even find the $20 that police had given the original man, and then that is when the strip search occurred.
Wow. So they never actually saw Reed give this guy drugs, so therefore they assumed he was the drug dealer.
Right. That's how it seems. The original arrest report on Ronnie isn't exactly clear of what happened other than this other man walked toward him. In the investigative file from the internal investigation, we saw an extra line that says an officer witnessed a drug exchange. But again, there were no drugs found on Ronnie either at the time of the arrest or at the jail. The $20 that was given to the other man in exchange for cocaine was found in his hand when he was arrested. That money was never found on Ronnie Reed either. And his defense attorney told me that she brought that to the state attorney's office and said, "I've never seen a drug dealer give on credit."
Wow. Again, another one of those crazy stories of what cops say one thing and something else, actually happens. But what was nuts here, they were trying to get this man to plead guilty.
Right. They spent more than a year trying to persuade him to plead guilty and take a 4-year prison sentence. But he kept fighting. He went through multiple defense attorneys, and ultimately the case was dropped in November. I believe it was November 14th or 5th, or I'm sorry, February. I believe it was February 14th or 15th. And that is when the state attorney said that they did not have enough evidence to bring him to court and prosecute him.
Questions from the panel. Robert, you first.
So with this, will there be any sort of apology, restitution, anything paid to this man for what he's had to go through in this situation? Because I've had similar cases to this. This is not an isolated incident. What systemic changes is the police department going to make to stop this from happening in the future?
So one of the interesting things that came out in the internal investigation is that the officers who stripped Ronnie said that they were actually never trained on what the search policy is, and they didn't even know that what they did constituted a strip search. So of course we asked JSO, knowing this information, have you done additional training in the department? We never got an answer back on that. JSO told one of the local TV stations here that they do offer and do require training on searches. But again, we don't know if there's anything that they're doing beyond what training they say they already have. And I do know Ronnie is talking with a civil attorney.
Scott?
Yeah, Scott Bolden here. He needs to talk to a civil attorney about this. You know, the idea that the police believed that they could strip search someone in public because they didn't have proper training. I had good home training. I had good upbringing. Taking somebody's pants down or making them strip in public just seems to be just at your core. We shouldn't do that. We should take him to the station, or we should put him in the police van or something. Just your core should tell you that, whether you're a police officer or not. But here's another question, similar to Robert's, right? What about training, and what about reformation of the prosecutor's office? I'm a former prosecutor from New York City. Either you got the evidence or you don't. Theoretically, philosophically rather, ethically, under most state bar rules and the APA, if you can't prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, if you can't prove the case or you don't bring the case, then you don't sit there for a year and try to get them to plead or something, because that means they're not trying to do justice. They're trying to get a conviction, right? Any discussions with any groups or that state's attorney's office about that reformation piece or that ethical piece? Because Ronnie ought to bring ethical charges against the assistant state's attorney for how they've handled this case. Because if they were going to dismiss it anyway, what were the internal memorandums about whether they could prove the case or not? And was there a memo that said, oh, just get him to take a plea, as opposed to dismissing him and doing justice? Roland, that's the difference between doing justice and just going after a conviction. Go right ahead, man.
I think that is something that he's exploring with his civil attorney. We actually haven't heard too much from the state attorney's office on that, on why they decided to continue to pursue these charges. When we first wrote the story, the answer was essentially a crime was committed and we are moving forward with this case. Yeah. We haven't heard much of an apology or any other details of why this was dropped or what the internal communication looked like. But that is information that we are looking to get, hopefully, through future records.
I'd make that part of your investigative reporting, because that gets lost sometimes. But that's a huge issue, because the police are one problem, but the prosecutors drive the investigation, drive the prosecution. And they've got to be ethically based. And if they violate their ethics, they ought to be brought to accountability.
Yeah, there are definitely two parts of the story, just like you said, JSO and the state attorney's office. We're going to continue reporting on this and seeing what we could find out.
And Roland, one of the first cases I did with Henry Daniels back in the day was a case similar to this, where a man had half an aspirin on the stove, and they tried to charge him with possession of crack cocaine with intent to distribute. And it took us over a year to get that case dismissed against him, once they finally got lab results to show there was half an aspirin. So this is not an isolated incident. Just thank God we have journalists who can actually deal with issues like this.
Yep.
Absolutely crazy. Nicole, great job reporting. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.